I'm Lee Patrick Sullivan with Clean Skies News. The Obama administration is pushing automakers to build a more fuel-efficient generation of gas-electric hybrids, turbocharged engines, and advanced vehicles powered by electricity under tough new standards. The final rules were signed today by the EPA and the Transportation Department, which will require 2016 model year vehicles to meet fuel efficiency targets of 35.5 miles per gallon combined for cars and trucks. That's an increase of nearly 10 miles per gallon over current standards set by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Now, joining us now for more is Charles Territo. He's a communications director at the Alliance for Automobile Manufacturers. Charles, let's get right to it. What's the Alliance's reaction to today's ruling?
Well, this is something we welcome. Last May, automakers stood with President Obama in the Rose Garden to express our support for this type of program. We think it's important to have consistency, we think it's important to have certainty, and we also think it's important to have flexibility. And that's something that these regulations provide.
Now, you mentioned the automakers meeting with President Obama in the Rose Garden. It was a totally different atmosphere last year. A lot of the automakers, at the time we thought all three of the U.S. automakers would be asking for emergency funds. Do you think that if they had to do it all over again in 2009, they still would agree on these standards?
Absolutely. We had been requesting this type of national program for years. In 2002, California passed the law giving it the authority to set its own greenhouse gas standards. In 2007, the Supreme Court gave the EPA the authority to set its own greenhouse gas standards, and NHTSA continued to set their own fuel economy standards. And so what we were facing just a year ago were three inconsistent standards by three different agencies. And that really created a patchwork quilt of regulation that would have made creating these vehicles very difficult to do cost effectively.
So in essence, if we had 50 different states with 50 different regulations, you would have had to have made a car for each different state.
Absolutely, and that was really a worst case scenario for the industry. This is something that we've been pushing for years as an industry, and we really welcome this new program.
Now, how does this new program differ from what the Bush administration tried to put through a few years ago? Does it just kick in earlier? Because I believe the Bush administration was 35 miles per gallon by the year 2017. This hits you at 2016. Is it just earlier implementation?
Well, there are some similarities between what was in the Energy Independence and Security Act signed in 2007. That required a standard of 35 miles per gallon by 2020, correct. Under this new regulation, that will meet that standard by 2016. What is different, though, is that for the first time, the EPA is regulating greenhouse gas emissions. And so this regulation will be expressed not only by miles per gallon, but by grams per mile of CO2. Automakers will have to meet a target of 250 grams per mile of CO2, in addition to meeting the 35 mile per gallon standard for miles per gallon. And there is a direct relationship between CO2 and fuel economy, so having this one national agreement makes a lot of sense.
Now, in this agreement, some automakers can also get credit for updating their air conditioning units in the cars if they can squeeze out an extra mile per gallon as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions. And also, electric vehicles will be listed as zero emission cars, even though if they get their electricity from a coal-fired power plant, that's not totally accurate. But is this a good incentive to get automobile manufacturers to go electric?
No question. Flexibility was one of the most important elements of this program that made it possible for manufacturers to support it. We need that flexibility because each year consumers purchase different types of vehicles, and whether or not manufacturers meet these standards or even exceed these standards depends on the types of vehicles consumers purchase. But also, not all manufacturers are working on the same technologies, and so giving them the ability to choose the pathway to meet these standards, that flexibility is extremely important.
Now, how will consumers react to this? Even in 2008, when gas prices were well over $4 a gallon, the top-selling vehicle in the United States still was the Ford F-150, and the second-selling vehicle was the Chevy Silverado. Not exactly model cars for this type of program, or model vehicles for this type of program. Will consumers switch to the fuel-efficient cars, or will they continue to buy their gas guzzlers?
I think consumers are going to continue to purchase the types of vehicles that best meet their needs. This regulation, as I said, gives manufacturers the flexibility, hopefully to make these types of improvements to vehicles in a way that's cost effective for consumers. You're absolutely right, though. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to make cars consumers are willing to purchase. And we believe that the way this regulation is structured, we'll have the ability to continue to do that.
And people should know that because the standard is at 35 miles per gallon, it doesn't mean every car has to get 35 miles per gallon. It's a fleet average, correct?
Correct. There will be different fuel economy averages for different manufacturers based on the types of vehicles they sell. What this regulation says, though, is that at the end of the day, when you add up the fuel economy of all the vehicles sold in the United States of America in 2016, they'll need to meet an average target of 35.5 miles per gallon.
Is this why we're seeing some of the American manufacturers, Ford, General Motors, the Fiat Chrysler combination, they're starting to bring some of their European models over here? Cars I'm thinking of are like the GM Spark, the Cruze, the Ford Fiesta, the Fiat 500. Are they bringing those over, these high mileage cars, to help, lack of a better word, pad the books so they can still sell their F-150s?
Well, you know, that only works if consumers purchase those vehicles. If those vehicles sit on dealers' lots and are never purchased, they'll do nothing to help a manufacturer comply with these standards. Manufacturers are bringing all types of new vehicles and new technologies to market based on what consumers are demanding. You know, while we don't have the same demand for the smaller vehicles that we did when gas hit $4 a gallon, one, there's no guarantee that it won't go back to $4 a gallon again. And two, we have seen a shift in the types of vehicles consumers are purchasing. Some of the fastest growing segments in the market are in the small car segment and in the smaller SUV segment. And so, you know, really, when you see manufacturers bringing these types of vehicles, you see them reacting to the demand that they're seeing in the marketplace.
Right. A final question. The last time we had a major overhaul of miles per gallon was in 1975, bringing it to, I believe, 22 miles per gallon. The reaction was people just started driving more. There was no reduction in the use of gasoline because their cars were getting better gas mileage. They just moved further away from their works. Will we see this have a reverse effect and have people actually drive more, creating more greenhouse gas?
Well, actually, you know, as EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson pointed out at the Washington Auto Show, this marks the 5th straight year that we've had fuel economy increases, and this guarantees that this will go on through 2016. Consumers may react by driving more. They also may react by buying more fuel-efficient vehicles. It's really difficult to tell what will happen. I think some of that will depend on the price of gasoline. If gas continues to be relatively cheap, it's going to be difficult for manufacturers to meet these standards. But if gas prices continue to rise, at the end of the day, I think you'll see more and more fuel-efficient vehicles on the market.
All right, thank you for joining us. We've been talking with Charles Territo. He's the Communications Director at the Alliance for Automobile Manufacturers. Thank you so much for joining us, Charles. I'm Lee Patrick Sullivan, and you've been watching Clean Skies News.